Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us for this session called Parenting During the Pandemic. Extra special thanks to our panelists who have stepped away from your crazy busy lives to share your lessons and your insights on this really important subject. You know, the idea for this session really came about as a result of the feedback that community gave us from the survey that we conducted in August, when you told us you wanted to start to gather and talk about some subjects that are important to you. So here we are. This session is being recorded for playback because we know a lot of people can't make these sessions live. So it will live on the A Balanced Glass website. And if you do have any questions that come up during the session, pop it in the chat box. I'll be keeping an eye on that while we get through this next hour together. So clearly I am not at all qualified to talk about parenting, but thankfully Kathy very much is, with more than 15 years of parenting twin boys. And so without further ado, Kath, I'll hand over to you. I'm gonna pop myself in the background and let's go.
Yeah, for sure. Beck, thank you. I just want to say, kind of for the record, how earnestly Beck in particular has taken the feedback that we have gotten, that we have solicited from the ABG community, and trying to deliver things, trying to deliver support and content that is very relevant to this audience. This is really one of them. The webinar series, it's the first that we're doing, and I think really a valuable set of ideas that we're going to take the ball and sort of run with it. But very excited to kick this off in particular. It's not something that gets talked about a lot, parenting during the pandemic. But I wanted to really, first of all, thank the 5 people who are going to share their experiences on what that's like. I'll introduce them in just a second. But this is not easy, and none of us are here to say, this is what you should do. As you'll hear in just a moment, every single one of us has a different parenting experience, different circumstances that we're dealing with. But the hope is that some of it will resonate with you. Hopefully you'll find maybe some humor in some of it, some sadness in others, but it's all real and it's all us as a community. So thank you again for being here and for joining this conversation because it is an important and very relevant one right now. Let me introduce the 5 panelists first, and then we'll cycle through them to hear their perspectives. So we'll start out with Ashley Trout, founder of Vital Wines and owner winemaker at Broken Bowl Cellars in Washington State. Ashley is married with 2 kids, a 9-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. We'll turn then to Monique Soltani, founder and host of Wino TV, based in Southern California. Monique is a widow with 5-year-old identical twin daughters. Jiwon Park is up next. She is the senior vice president at Magrino PR in New York. Ji is married with 2 kids, ages 11 and 6. Bruno Almeida is next. He's a wine and spirits educator, a Portuguese wine advocate, and wine director and sommelier based in New York as well. He is divorced and going through the pandemic, sharing custody of an almost 12-year-old boy, his son. And Lizzie Gallagher, who is the president and CEO of Visit Napa Valley, based, of course, in Napa. She is married with 2 kids, a daughter age 8 who's in 3rd grade, and a son age 6 who is in 1st grade. As the moderator and sort of an observer of this panel as well, I am married with twin boys who are 15 years old, sophomores in high school. So let me kick it over first to Ashley. Ashley, can you tell us about sort of one of the topics that has really risen to the surface for you during this pandemic as you try to parent your two kids?
Yeah, Kathy and Beck, thanks for doing this in the first place. It's a great idea and very needed. So what we have done is we started a pod in our basement, and when we were heading into starting this pod, I called my very type A cousin in San Francisco who has kids at the exact same age, and I said, hey, we're going to do this. What are you doing? And he said, well, we can't do that because, of all these sort of litigious issues and risk assessment and this, that, and the other. And we're out here in the country. And I was like, okay, well, we're going to do it. So, I think the saving grace for us has been just sort of that a lot of people in the countryside do sort of take things less seriously overall, right? It's a farming community and acts accordingly. And there are cons to that, but there are also pros to that. And we're very much experiencing that. So the pod that we have has been amazing. And I really love it. And it has solved, what it's allowed us to do is really, I don't care whether the school is going to open or not open. That's not my problem. We have a solution and we are sticking with it. And it has entailed us at certain times. I'm the superintendent of the school because it is at our house, and because people tend to look towards mothers like in a school setting, which drove my husband crazy because he was like, I'm here, I'm answering emails. Why doesn't anybody care about what I have to think? And I was like, I'm sorry, honey, I'll stick up for you. But it was pretty consistent. So I turned into the superintendent as a result. And really my job as superintendent is morale. Like, that's it. And so that means that I bake muffins on Fridays. And that what it has come to, what it's made me realize is like, that's all it's about is like having muffins to look forward to on Fridays, right? It can be that small. And I was telling Kathy, it's not even muffins. I have a muffin top pan. And this is crucial because where else in your life do you have access to muffin tops? Nowhere, just at our school. And so it's this like special curated experience. I have a Google Doc with like 70 different muffin recipes. And I send it out on Thursday, like I pick one, and then I send out the recipe on Thursday night to pre-funk and get everybody pumped about the muffins. And I know I'm spending a lot of time on the muffins, but that's my point, right? Like, all of this is broken. It's going to stay broken for a really long time. And so if you can spend an inordinate amount of time creating joy around muffin tops, I think now is the time to do that, right? And I think winemakers are like unfairly fit for going through a pandemic because that's all we ever do is like we are the surfers of the wine industry. So if you look at a surfer dude, like it's very hard to take them seriously, nor should you, right? But if you look at what they actually accomplish, they're riding the 70-foot wave, and it's crazier than anything you'll ever do, right? But are they paying their bills? Probably not, right? So like that's very much what the winemaker is within the wine industry. We could never live in a vacuum. We need actually organized people who actually care about details and keeping things under control. But control for us is not a thing we need because you're never going to get that during harvest. You're never going to get that during a fermentation. And so it's not a thing we need. And I think that has been a real gift heading into this pandemic with kids. And so the two lessons I've kind of grabbed onto are like, what are the small wins that you have control over, and how do you disproportionately market that to yourself and your kids and your community, right? Because you can do that. And so if you can, to pull from a different experience, there was, I heard an interview with a lady, and I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember her name, but she was in this concentration camp as a child. It was a Japanese concentration camp. She was Chinese, and the nuns that were taking care of her made a really big deal out of socks and like the length of their socks. And she said at the time it was ridiculous that they were this strict about the socks, right? And then she said in retrospect, even the nuns didn't care about the socks. What they were trying to do was like lock everybody in to focusing on a thing that you had control of, that you could, the full control of, that you could win, right? And so that I think is a big deal. And then also just, you know, having that grace to understand that none of your, you know, there's going to be a lot that's messy on the periphery, but you have to let that go in order to ride that 70-foot wave and nail it, right? And so I would say those are the kinds of things I've locked onto that have gotten us through this, frankly, just fine. And that's been great. I mean, we're, you know, it's every day there's like we've got smoke that hit this harvest, and we're closed and outdoors only, and it's raining, and you know, there's a lot going on. Our kids, one of them was puking on Tuesday night from last week, and so what does that mean? And do we lock ourselves upstairs while school continues downstairs? So it's not a cakewalk by any means, but those are kind of the gems that I've been able to use a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, Ashley, thank you. So the school pod that you created, who's in the school? How did you decide who was going to be in the school?
Yeah. For us, it was really important that we had some kids in the school for free, because not everybody's going to get through this pod or through this pandemic just fine. So we did that, and then we're funny. We're a small town. We're 35,000 people, but we represent 175 wineries, which means everybody is in the wine industry. So with our pod, we're 4 families, but we represent 7 wineries. So it's all winemakers or people who run wine clubs or people who are GMs of wineries. So we're all wineries.
Yeah. Yeah. And just one last thing. So can you please make the connection between your school mascot and the muffins?
God, I wish I had my sweatshirt. We made sweatshirts and they're awesome. So the kids decided, and again, it's like gripping onto these little details. The kids decided that they wanted our puppy to be the mascot, but that they wanted her dressed up in a princess outfit. And we're called the School Avenue School because we're on School Avenue. And so for the SAS logo, my graphic designer, I reached out to him. He stopped everything he was doing that day. He had much more pressing issues and he did not do any of them. And he created the SAS logo with the puppy. He dumbed her down to just the tiara, and she's a big dog. She's like stepping all over the SAS logo, can't be contained, full puppy style. So her name is Muffin. And so that's why the muffins. Also because muffins are great.
Because muffins are great, especially muffin tops. Okay, and so as Monique goes next, will you please take a second and put a link in the chat box to how to get a muffin tin? What's the best muffin tin? Yeah, okay, great. Monique, can we please transition to you?
I don't know. I want to get into Ashley. Like, I want what she's got. I want to be a winemaker. I want to see muffin. Like, I want to send my kids to your pod. Like, we're not that figured out. And I almost like think, what am I doing talking about that on this panel? Because like my motto is like the total opposite. I'm either like having a nervous breakdown or I'm completely enlightened and found the light. But I totally don't have it figured out. And I also didn't know if I should call this like surviving the sucker punches or like opting out, because that's sort of been my experience this year, has been, you know, particularly challenging for the past few years that I've had in my life. I feel like we keep getting knocked down. And this was kind of the final blow for me, I think, and for my daughters. So without getting into too much backstory, I'm sure a lot of you know our history. And if you don't, well, I'm not going to get into it right now. But I will talk about some things that have worked for me and for us. And there are some universal themes there, this idea of focusing in on what you can control. But what has been particularly comforting to me in this time that hasn't necessarily been the case in the past few years is we are all going through a universal experience, and all the parents here on this panel, we're all here talking. This is universal, and we're all suffering the loss of something, and it's communal. And something about the communal suffering in a way makes it easier. I can't quite explain it, but going through something together with community makes it a little bit or a lot of it easier, at least for me. So I've decided for me, what has gotten me going is just like a shift in my mindset. When this all started, I felt like I might actually have a nervous breakdown. My 4-year-old was screaming at me when I was crying in my bed. And I'm like, as anyone who has small kids knows, you can't stay in the bed and cry. Like, you literally have to get up. And when you have 4-year-old twins, you are essential. You're essential to them. And I was and have been essential to them. And that kind of keeps me going in a way. And I also feel like even the fact that I'm sitting here talking, that any of us are talking, I think it goes without saying that we're in a position of privilege to even be having this time, that I'm not working at a grocery store or doing something. I'm not trying to, I know we all feel that way, but I particularly feel privileged that I'm able to say, I've opted out, I'm not working, I'm gonna focus on just keeping these 2 humans alive and really making it bearable for them. So been living in San Francisco for, I don't know, well over a decade. When I was sitting there thinking about pushing forward with the life I have, even though it's not the life I want, I was able to start thinking about, okay, this is the life you have, even if it's not the life you want. What would you want in your life? What can you control that you want? And I want sunshine. Like, I want space. I want things that are not available to me right now, but they can be. Like, I can find a place that has sunshine. Like, I live in California. I don't have to be in the fog. So I really did the whole, pardon the expression, but burn it down. I left, I moved, I left the city with my daughters after 4 months of solitary confinement with them, and decided if this is going to be our reality, what would make our reality better? For me, the reality would be better if we had more space and we had sun. I was never going to leave San Francisco. I'm a city girl through and through, but this was, you know, the thing that sort of broke it for me. And then the other thing for me was, what are your non-negotiables? So when this all started, I was doing a lot of the Zoom classes, and I'm really agitated. My daughters are really agitated, and they're killing each other, and I'm killing them. And I'm like, we don't even use technology. I'm not a parent who ever gave my kids an iPad. It goes against my core principles as a person. Everybody has their core beliefs and principles, but for me, that was one of them. We don't use technology, therefore. And so the pandemic has forced all these things on us that we would never typically accept for our lives. So why was I accepting it? I didn't have to accept it. They're at an age where it's a little bit optional. So I pulled them out of school. I did not put them in kindergarten this year, even though I did pay for kindergarten this year. I decided that even if they learn to ride bikes in 2020, which they haven't yet, or maybe they just learn to swim. Like, maybe that's what we do this year. They don't know how to write their letters. Okay, fine. Like, that wasn't working for me. So I decided I was going to opt out of life. A little bit. They're swimming now. Moved to Southern California, where if I did get sick, I know there's at least one person that would break COVID for me. She's over 65 and she's got medical issues, but I know my mom, worst case scenario, if it all went to, you know, hell and I got sick or we got sick, she could be there. And I didn't know that I had anybody that I could really break COVID for or would break COVID for me in San Francisco. So and then this idea of like finding the fun, which I know Ashley talked about. Like, kids are fun and they want to have fun, and they want to have fun with you if you're their mom. So if I could find the fun with them, that also helped me a lot. And then thinking about just with my past experience, the past couple years, and thinking about, you know, without getting too hokey, like what matters. Like, I am never, ever, ever for my whole life going to regret this time I spent with my children. Like, I know this for a fact. Like, this time is hard, but how I respond to it can make it much harder. And so I know, knowing that I'm never going to regret this time with my children is like a mantra that I say in my head when they make me mad or when I get frustrated, because I don't get Saturday night breaks, right? There's no, this is 2-4-7, me alone with them for 8 months now. And that's real. And so other ways I've managed is I've sort of done this thing where I've elevated them. These are like some tangible takeaways, but like I like to dine, you know, other people like to do different things, but for me, I like to have like a proper meal. And when it first started, we were eating in the kitchen, it was all dirty and I'm doing all the work. And, you know, when you have another partner, one of them's putting the kids in bed and the bath and doing all this and you're getting dinner, it was like I was doing everything. And so I was like, forget it. Bed, bath, all the work is done before dinner. Okay, you're gonna be in your pajamas, you're gonna be fully bathed, the work is over, we're gonna sit at the formal dining room, you're gonna drink out of crystal, you're 4, I don't care, you're gonna elevate yourself, you're gonna rise to the occasion. And the daughter, they elevate themselves, you know, like I empower them to elevate themselves to rise to the occasion. And so now we dine with crystal wine glasses. Now they sometimes they drink out of their Grammy Ruth's crystal wine glasses, and then we've elevated ourselves and they elevate themselves. So another thing I do, like, I don't know how we're at with time, I'm a bit of a ramble and I'm better with like a conversation crosstalk than I am with just rambling on, but I give myself a lot more time. That's something I'm in control over, the time and how I spend it. I used to rush to pick them up from school or whatever, and I had all this anxiety and I would get there and it'd be like so stressful. This is in my control. Like this stress is self-created. I don't need that rush of anxiety. So I leave, 20 minutes earlier than I need to. I sit in my car. I do a little 10-minute meditation that I'd been doing. I'm the first one in preschool pickup line because I put them in preschool. That was the other part of the equation. I downgraded them. They were supposed to start kindergarten. I don't care. Back in preschool, opting out. So I'm the first one there. I'm not stressed out. They're happy. I'm happy. Yeah. And then the other thing that like sort of worked for me was just checking my gut in a way. Like, this has been such a difficult time, but like when I'm feeling like agitated or irritated or like something isn't right or they're feeling like something is wrong. So what is it? What's happening? Like usually there's like you could pinpoint to what it is. Maybe I was on my phone too much. Maybe I was checking emails or looking at something and it was agitating me and then they were getting agitated. And so this idea that just like doing this gut check has helped me a lot, and obviously finding the fun. And then this mantra, I wrote it down because this is another one that sounds a little hippy dippy, and I'm not really that hippy dippy, but I'm reading this book on transcendental meditation. Okay, fine. I found one line in the 300-page book that resonated, and it was, I wrote it down because I didn't want to get it wrong. It was, don't waste your energy on thoughts that don't matter. Now, I know it seems really silly, but I'm going to say it again. Don't waste your energy on thoughts that don't matter. So to me, I never thought of my thoughts as wasting energy. I thought what I was doing was wasting energy, and like all my actions could waste energy. But like the amount of time I spend in my head, either stressing or worrying or thinking or replaying or, even right now, I'm like, oh my gosh, is this resonating? So there's a thought, so, am I rambling? Yes. So this idea that you're wasting actual energy thinking with things that don't matter, I don't know, that helped me a lot. So I'm trying to work on that. And
yeah. I love that. I love that you pulled like those, how many words is that? 7 or 8 words, Monique, from a 300-page book.
That's all I got out of the book. Yeah.
Obviously that spoke to you. Obviously
that was it.
And I actually want to be mindful, Monique, because you actually do need to sort of step out, before long. Yeah. So if anybody wants to message Monique, please do. Just be, just so you know that she actually has to go and pick up her daughters. So she'll be ducking out a little bit early.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Monique.
Thank you.
G, can we please shift to you?
Hi. So I have two children, ages 6 and almost 12, actually. He'll be 12 next week. He's been doing the countdown. And we live in Manhattan. We live on the far upper west side in Washington Heights by the Cloisters Museum, for those of you who may be familiar with New York City. So when the beginning of the pandemic happened, just like everyone else, we thought, oh, it's going to be like 2 weeks. And of course, that did not happen. We had thought about creating a pod, but I think you may or may not have seen in the news that quickly became sort of a class economic issue in New York City. So tutors wanting some outrageous prices. And I knew I didn't have the wherewithal for that. Like, I know what my skill sets are, and I'm super organized, and I'm so jealous of Ashley for being able to do that. I could not literally get my brain wrapped around it. So we opted for all remote for our kids. And not really, it came down to us making a decision, like, can we actually do homeschooling on our own? No. But can they actually physically go to school? No. I had a very serious health issue a few years ago, and so we really had to make decisions based on that, which actually felt crushing and sort of like an epic failure as a parent, to be perfectly honest. Like, to think that I'd have to send a kindergartner to full remote, or now she's in first grade, really did kill me, because it's purely based on my health needs, not her. And so it has been an interesting experience. I was a former TV producer for a million years at CBS, at the network. And you know, when you do a job like that, it's kind of like being a publicist, and certainly sounds like what a winemaker is like, right? Every day in your head, you have an idea of what you think your day is going to be. It's never like that, right? And parenthood is sort of like that too. And I just think every day, the tips that I learned as being a producer, which is think about the 3 things you actually just have to achieve no matter what happens. Like, you're covering Hurricane Katrina. You know what? There are 3 things you just need to make happen, and the rest of it can fall down, and you'll pick it up and you'll figure it out. And so we just sort of had to decide that. And to me, that's the big takeaway. I wish, you know, I'm really inspired to hear Ashley and Monique talk about the fun. I'm not fun enough, to be perfectly honest. My children, I'm pretty much your stereotypical Korean tiger mom. And then you add my job, and like, it just like, in fact, my husband sometimes has to remind me, like, oh, honey, they're like 11 and 6. Could you back up a little bit? And I think it's a good reminder. It's a good reminder also to know that as much as this is stressful for us, it's really stressful for them too, in a way that they can't even necessarily verbalize, right? And so just trying to be mindful of that. But yeah, for me, the takeaway is, what's the one thing they really have to kind of do? And for us, we decided, living in an apartment in Manhattan, they have to go out and move their body. So it doesn't matter what I have to do. Like, I got to get the 6-year-old out to the playground, because mask on, she's got to see her friends, even at a distance, or run around. So today my husband was home, and I had back-to-back Zoom. So he made sure to carve out that 1 hour to get her out. And I don't know, I think it's about the small wins, but definitely I feel stressed. Like, I'm tearing up just thinking about it. Like, there are days where it just feels really hard. I've literally been on Zoom calls today since 9 a.m. And then then you got to think, when am I going to get dinner done? Oh God. And when am I going to get like all those 20 million PowerPoints? So it's, I thought parenting before was difficult, before the pandemic, because listening to Monique is what I did, like getting on the subway, got to get to after school on time. Holy cow, I hope they're not going to charge me that $10 by the minute, because I am that parent that is literally like running on my like last, bits of air, like, hello, I'm here, I'm so sorry, right? Like, that was who I was. That seems like a cakewalk compared to this. And I will say, I've never been a joiner. Bex knows me, so I think she'll understand that. I'm not a big group person, not because I'm just an introvert. It's shocking. I'm sure that doesn't come across, but I'm a little bit shyer, and I don't necessarily do groups. But I would say that in an odd way, this pandemic has actually made me create additional relationships with other working moms within my neighborhood, because the reality is, I couldn't do it alone. And I just like, there are days where one of us has a million calls and it's like, hey, I can take Harrison and Sadie to the playground. Can we do that? Like, I'll just meet you on the sidewalk and we'll just go to the playground for 45 minutes. And so I've realized that that's the only way we can kind of make it happen. And I think this has been a very tough time. And I'm so relieved to hear other people are going through it. And I am going to definitely invest in some muffin tops, because I did buy muffin tops at Whole Foods last week. And my husband was like, who eats muffin tops? Well, I'm going to eat muffin tops now. So thank you for that, Ashley. So
Yeah, G, thank you. And I also want to recognize that G really sort of hit the nail on the head for a couple of the things that the themes that are orienting this webinar. One is the title of last week's ABG post, which was "Work Like You Don't Have Children and Parent Like You Don't Have a Job." G, maybe that came directly from you, but it just sort of absolutely is the thing. And then also you recognize that the anxiety around being so concerned about work, but yet very aware of the health of our children, and at the same time being really concerned about our children, but also trying to figure out how the hell you're supposed to work, right? So those things, G, just absolutely, I just wanted to recognize that you just hit the nail on the head for so much.
And it's exhausting. And I feel like all of you must relate to that. I feel like there's no set work off hours anymore. And I don't know how many of you feel that, but for me, it's like to get anything done in the morning, it's like I'm writing emails queued up so that my colleagues can get things started, where I need to dip out for maybe an hour to get the kids started on their remote learning and breakfast on the table. It's like, and then tonight it'll be another like 11 p.m. on the laptop. So it's hard. And I think I really hope that there's some sort of change coming, but I think to Ashley's point, like the system's been broken for such a long time. And now it's like, okay, we need to kind of cobble it together ourselves or with wonderful people that make up our village.
Yeah. Thank you, G. Thank you. Can I shift to Bruno? Bruno, you look like you've got a lot going on in your background there. So, yeah. Yeah.
So thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Rebecca, for inviting me. And I would like to thank all of you, the panelists, for sharing their reality. But again, like I can relate to a lot of things from each person that just spoke before me. Again, I'm divorced. I've been divorced for about 3 years. And I share the custody for about 2, sometimes 3 days a week. And in these moments, I've been working in hospital for 18 years and been raising my son for 12 years. It's going to be almost 12. I cannot believe, but it's going to be almost 12. So during this time, like I think it was actually, I'm not working. So I'm not in that situation being like very like, I'm not feeling really that stressed that I can see easily some of you getting like by having to clock in, to sign in like early in the morning. I'm not doing that, unfortunately not because of the way hospitality is in New York City. But in the meantime, like I feel like the beginning, everything that I was doing as a parent, I was always trying like to have like a precise schedule so I could like pick him up from daycare like at 4 o'clock and then put him like to his grandma and then go to work at 6 and close. Like, so I always try to do that. And the way that I'm being experienced with the pandemic is actually to how I'm going to reinvent myself, not only like with my career, because the job of a sommelier and a wine director, like in wine educator, is very a gray area right now. It's been like an endangered species for quite a while, and now more than ever. So how can I change this in a positive way that after 18 years, what can I do and come back and see my son like growing up now that he's 12? Now that I can see that like he's having all these hairs. We were just having pizza for lunch and I was looking at his hairs like in his legs, like, dude, you have more hairs than I have. So like that change, I can see more of that change right now because I'm home. Because even if I was going to be heading to my shift, if I was working like right now, I wouldn't be able like to have lunch with him because he was at school. So everyone has different realities and different perspectives. I think depends on demographics, depends on location. Like again, I can see a lot of things from G, like we working like in New York, like I live in Harrison, but basically I spend all the time. As Portuguese, I arrived in the US in 2002. As Portuguese, Portugal, like Mediterranean countries, it's all about the family and the friends. Everyone knows each other. So I see a lot of my friends back there, like, oh, he is with my grandpa, he's with my brother, or like the neighbor, like across the street, because everyone knows each other. At this moment, I have no one. It's basically me and my ex-wife, and she basically doesn't have that much people. So like me working in hospitality, the whole thing with the pandemic for me comes a little bit before that. Was always the elephant in the room for me about how difficult it is like to raise a son working in hospitality because of schedules and the way of life. So I'm trying to like adapt myself towards this. But yes, I can see some challenges. I can see some positives again, like I'm seeing him like growing up more like closely, but now that he's like what he's dealing, his stress. He mainly had like a lot of stress like last year in his school, but that made me like rethink about something very simple, that is you need to check the ratings from your schools. And I did that, and now I realize why he fairly struggled with his school last year, because of the ratings of that same school were not the greatest. And the ratings from this school right now that he is are way much better, and everything is way easier for him. He was having trouble with mathematics last year, and now he's all A plus, A plus, A plus. I'm like, continue, because your dad is horrible with numbers. So he's going to be my accountant. He's going to be my guy for my business in a couple of years. But is he struggling? Yes. Is he stressing a little bit? But at times, like I ask him, like, listen, like, is this like, do you miss school? Like, yeah, but actually I'd rather be at home with a little bit. Like, and okay. Does that make me like understand like what's going on with the school, getting back to the school, like makes me understand like more, like I'm getting more like in contact and communicating with the teachers, something that I wasn't last year. Just like, hey, bye-bye, hey, good morning, something that I'm doing now. Questions, email, I'm learning more about that. I'm learning about those kind of things. And I think those things are positive, are things that really the system needs to understand. Yeah, like it tells me like whenever like he has trouble during his classes, it's actually when the teachers are in the school, because the Wi-Fi connection is actually very poor at school. So like we all need to understand like what's the realities of a lot of the teachers are going through. But yes, it made me as a parent, like I want to get back like to what I used to do, like to spend as much time I can with him. And I totally know that he needs me now that he's 12. I can totally see it. It's because I try to keep up, because I only spend like 2 days a week. So like it's like after 5 days, like, hey, what's going on? Every night, like, did he do this? Did he do that? Like she's texting me, like telling like to finish this, finish that. But this thing with computers for him was fairly easy in a certain extent, because he was introduced to iPads in the before kindergarten and preschool. So like the whole thing with, he tells me how to do it, like with try like for me to do like a YouTube channel, like he tells me how to do it, or how to get like Spotify for free. Like he knows like to do all that. He's a nerd, so that's why he prefers actually in a certain extent to be more at home, more than being at school, because of that whole thing. He has no cousins. He has not, so he kind of locked himself a little bit, like, which is something that I'm not proud of, but that's why I need to revamp myself towards what I do in hospitality. And this thing for me, and I'm sharing this, something that I could not be sharing last year. So that's all the positives that I'm taking. I think it's taking step by step, just like Monique said, like we cannot control certain things. And that's, for me as a father, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, Bruno, thank you. So we know that he's great at math. We know that he's great with computers, and we know that he has hairy legs.
Hairy legs, and he doesn't want to share. He doesn't want to show his hairy legs when he's doing physical education in front of a camera. So that's another struggle, the stress for them. He's doing jump jacks, and he's like, I don't feel comfortable. Like he puts the camera away, he turns off, and then he gets like a lower grade because of that. So they have struggles. They have this and this, but And I'm super intrigued what's going to happen, because like I live in New Jersey, Harrison. It's close to Newark, 20 minutes away from the city. I work in the city, but it was meant today. It was meant today to start to go back to school. That was the plan a month ago, or when the school started. Now it's going to be to January. But I'm intrigued, like if we go hybrid, how is that going to play with me and her, like sharing, picking me up, like and all those things. And in the meantime, if a case happens, how are we going to deal with it? Because I hear reports and from some other states saying like there was a case, actually that kid that made a mistake or didn't know it, the family didn't properly report it or anything, the kid got bullied because he tested positive. He didn't say to the school, he didn't say to the class. So it's those challenges that we need to understand that kids most and foremost are going to face, and we need to be prepared for it.
Right, right. And as somebody who has gone through a 12-year-old kid experience, sort of noticing like, oh, they have hair on their legs, you know, like that's a moment. But it's also
preparing me for the next phase.
For the next, there's more to come. There's more.
That's why I'm drinking champagne, because that helps me like to.
Yeah, but there's also, and Rachel pointed this out in the chat box as well, there's really different learning styles among our kids, right? Some kids who are more introverted and quiet. I have one of those, and you know, doing fine with homeschooling, frankly, with virtual schooling. But the other kid is absolutely an extrovert, and really, he was born to be a Saturday kid. Like he needs to be out there and playing, and you know, be on teams and things. So it's again yet another thing to need to be aware of and to juggle. So thank you for bringing those things up, Bruno. Yeah, great. So can we shift please to Lindsay, who is who's the final speaker here. But Lindsay, I know that those are some of the things that are on your mind as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for including me in this conversation today. I've learned a lot and taken several notes myself on how I can navigate this more effectively. Every day is managed chaos in my house. As Kathy indicated in the introduction, I have a 6-year-old first grade boy and an 8-year-old in third grade girl. And this is really, really tough on them. They're both very social children and love to be with their friends and playing a lot of sports and doing a lot of activities. We perhaps were over-programmed going into COVID, but to have all of that disappear literally overnight has been really tough on them. And as I shared in our preliminary conversation when we were preparing for this panel, I know exactly what day we went into shelter in place here in Napa in California, because it was the night before my then 5-year-old's birthday party. And so we canceled his 6-year-old birthday party on Saturday, March 12th. And he is processing now, is he going to have a second birthday that's canceled because of COVID, and was crying about that over the weekend. So we sadly still have his piñata and his party favors and all of that stuff in a box in the basement. But his little 6-year-old world is really, has been turned upside down, and he doesn't understand what the punishment is for. And he has a really hard time with the Zoom format, sitting in a chair for the expectation is 3 hours with a little bit of a break, and then more follow-up homework in a digital format is just really tough on his little 6-year-old spirit, I guess I would say. So in any event, we are trying to navigate that as a family, and my daughter is doing a little better with this in her third grade world, can read independently, reads well above her grade level, and so she certainly doesn't love it, but she's not quite as tortured by it, I would say, as my son is. And then you have the reality, in my case, of 2 full-time working parents who are fortunate to have retained their jobs, I suppose, but also frantically trying to deal with day-to-day. My husband works for a winery and manages communications and media relations, and so that has been more busy even than usual. And I started a new role in the tourism industry here in Napa Valley a little over a year ago. And so I'm assuming a new leadership role in an industry that has been simply decimated in this pandemic. and just trying to, have wisdom and grace and presence amidst chaos in all directions. I'm a planner, I'm OCD with calendars, I like to manage lots of schedules. And so this, I think, for me, I have to focus on being present and not overwhelmed by every single day having to pivot in all directions, whether it's for school related or personal related, or struggling with how do I show leadership and really be a beacon for an industry that's under tremendous pressure and suffering right now. Hospitality has been one of the hardest hit industries, whether that's the restaurant side or in our case here in Napa Valley, the wineries, hotels, other visitor serving businesses. It's just been devastating. We are the #2 employer, hospitality, here in the Napa Valley behind the wine industry, and that's also been impacted. So it's really been an exercise in getting to know my small town community in a way that I hadn't before. And I feel every day the pressure and the obligation to steward this Napa Valley brand, to keep it healthy, to keep it vibrant, to keep this place aspirational and inspirational for people from around the world. And that's particularly challenging right now. And then we've had, as I call them, layers of crisis that have happened on top of the COVID layer. We had 2 rounds of wildfires here in the Napa Valley, both in August and in late September. And we also had significant smoke coming from wildfires in other regions that likely damaged the majority of our 2020 crop here of grapes. Most of our grapes, or certainly the highest priced ones, are Cabernet Sauvignon. That's a late ripening varietal. And the second round of fires couldn't have come at a worse time in the vineyard life cycle. So, that's, pardon the language, that's my shit show every day. Is how do I have been coming into my office because it's 2 blocks from my house. My husband and I both used to travel a ton. I traveled internationally for 10 years with little kids in my prior role with the California Wine Institute. And I took this job so that I could have some travel, but it wasn't just the hamster wheel that I was on previously. So there is the blessing that neither my husband nor I are traveling right now. And this is the most time we've spent under the same roof in the same zip code in the entire 12 years that we've been married. So I do think, it's great for the kids to have us home for dinner every night. And one of us is in the basement and one of us peels off to an office for a few hours a day as we can. But anyway, it is managed chaos. It's most days I say we get through on a wing and a prayer. There's a lot of duct tape in all directions, whether that's kid related or work related. In my case, with these layers of crisis and trying to show leadership for an industry that's battered and bruised and desperately needs something positive to hang on to. And so that my role in my organization is to provide that on behalf of the industry. We've also had to downsize here in my office from a staff of 30 to a staff of 6.5. And so I feel like I've been navigating the grieving process that goes with having to lay off or terminate staff members and family members and friends, and how do you build morale and who remains in the organization, and how do we build back from that. And we're starting down that path, but I know many of you in the restaurant and winery space are facing that as well. It's pretty traumatic. But at the end of the day, I think that my key takeaways are to be kind to myself and to lower my expectations of myself, and so that I can be less bitter and less frantic in front of my children all the time, and that they deserve for us to be present, even if all 4 of us are Zooming at the same time at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we're hoping that the internet bandwidth can handle it. But to really meet my children where they're at with this struggle, to recognize that this is hard and that I can't fix it. But to remind them that they're surrounded by love and they have a support system and they're going to be okay. And we will have a raging 8th birthday party for my son if we don't get to have the 6th or 7th. And really just to try to have grace in all of this. I think I have to have that at work, and I try to have that at home. But in closing, I've said this before, and I think it's particularly poignant for me in this current scenario is that, you know, some days I'm a good wife, and some days I'm a good mother, and some days I'm a good employee, but that's never on the same day. So today may be a win day as a mom, and I'm probably going to feel pretty guilty about how I handled it at work. I also am doing those odd day parts where I'm either getting up at 4:30 and doing a 4:30 to 7, get everything out of my inbox, give my staff and my industry direction, and then go dark until noon because I'm covering the Zooms. Or it's put the kids to bed at 8:30 or 9. I mean, they've been staying up late in this whole thing, which just my evening shift starts later. But then having to get out of, you know, get back downstairs and fire up my laptop and do 2 or 3 hours in the evening, like the ping pong match, just get the balls back to the other side and then, you know, respond in chunks of time versus having a full day to manage it. It's sort of, you know, I feel like it's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of details. It's not easy, but we literally are all in this, and we have to make it okay. And, you know, you have to make sure that you don't lose yourself in the process, I suppose, but it's a gong show most of the time.
A gong show. Boy, I haven't heard that reference in a really long time. I love that. I love it. I feel like
rodeo is the other one that I'm like, oh.
There you go. I feel like grace fatigue is a thing. Fatigue is a thing. Zoom fatigue obviously is a thing, but grace fatigue is a thing as well.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then you get to stare at yourself in Zoom all day long. And I'm like, look at the wrinkles on my forehead. Do I really look this orange? Because
nobody wants to
being
do
in a mirror all day long is horrible.
Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do that. Lindsay, thank you. Thanks very much. So I saw a lot of nodding of the heads for those of you who I can see during as all 5 of you were talking. So I want to use the last couple minutes here to see if anybody wants to ask a question to any of the panelists, or the panelists might want to ask a question to each other. Devin, go ahead.
So, hi everyone. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, both boys. My husband and I both have always worked full time, so this has been a juggling act, to say the least, as you all have experienced. My 6-year-old came home last week, and he walked in the door rambling a story to me that he wanted me to be listening to, and I was doing the yeah, and I was looking at my phone, and then I said, "That's great." And he looked at me and he said, "What? That's not great. I fell and hurt myself." And in that moment, I felt overwhelmed, as I have this whole time, with mom guilt. So I wanted to kind of ask you guys, because it's something that plagues me day in, day out, whether I'm not paying as much attention, I'm on my device, I'm not getting on the ground and playing Legos with them, and I just don't feel like it, to be honest. I'm not taking them to the playground. I'm letting them sit on the couch and sort of do nothing, and it's kind of all I can do to keep it together. So how do you guys manage mom guilt? Do you experience it, or dad guilt? What are some coping mechanisms? Because I'm struggling.
Any of the panelists want to chime in on that?
Well, I have lots of guilt. So yeah, I think I don't have any advice except for I have the same thing. And, you know, my daughters said to me, "You were a lot nicer when Daddy was alive." And I said, "You were a lot nicer too." And that's the truth. Like, we're all like having an experience, like, yeah, you're on your phone more, like people are connecting to you more, like it just is, like we're doing the best we can. And like I say to them, this is the best I can do right now. Like, I'm trying so hard to be here for you and to be everything for you, but you need to meet me halfway. Like, they're old. I'm like the worst parent. This is why I'm like, should never give advice, because I remember being 5. Okay. So in my mind, I know what they're old enough to rise to the occasion, even in that way. Like, so I just tell them, yeah, I messed up. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm not perfect. I'm trying so hard, but I love you so much. Every day I do this for you. I show up for you. I need you to show up for me too. So I don't know. That's what I do. But
Yeah, I don't think I have any advice on that, except,
advice.
you know, I feel that mom guilt every day. And honestly, now my 6-year-old, she does the same thing, rambling story. And I'm like, And she just now gets so upset. She will pound her fist if we're at the dinner table. And she goes, is anyone listening to me? And that's obviously, she's frustrated. And so I try to reframe it. I think I just try to, when she's starting to tell a story, sometimes I will tell her before she starts. It's sort of managing expectations. Like, mommy really wants to hear this story, but we may have to save this for like bedtime, you know, when we're getting ready to read a book. Because right now, mommy really wants to pay attention, but I really have to get this very important email out for mommy's client or whatever it is. And so it doesn't always work. But I will say, like, beating yourself up isn't going to help either, because you're probably a way more amazing human than you think. It's just really hard. Like, you're all of a sudden like juggling everything you need to do on a regular level, their stuff, your husband's stuff, like all of this like energy is in the same 4 walls. Like, the stuff that you used to be able to dissipate and go out and deal with in your office and them at their school, it's just really hard. I think you need to lighten up on yourself a little bit. And trust me, I am the worst on myself. But I think also, to Monique's part, like, if you're going to expect them to drink out of crystal, they can also be told, like, guess what? This is a tough day for mom. And I do say that to my 6-year-old, like, or my almost 12-year-old. Like, this has been a tough day. Mom's been on calls all day, but I want to make you a really yummy dinner. So me make the dinner, and then we'll sit down and talk about things and try to carve that out a little bit. Doesn't always work.
Like, this close to bursting into emotional tears. This feels like a support group. So thank you.
Yeah. Ashley, please.
Yeah. So Devin, for me, that was that kind of thing was the breaking point. March and April, my husband and I took the kids 50-50. And then in like April, I found many of those parts of the day that you just described. And that's when I was like, I am bad at this. What we are doing here, this is bad. It's bad for me. It's bad for them. It is bad, a capital BAD. And it's not going to get better unless I switch something structurally. And so for me, that's when we reached out to one other couple. And I don't know if this is a place where you can be legally, physically, emotionally, whatever, but that's when we hooked up with one other family, and I took all 4 kids on Tuesdays, and Brian took all 4 kids on Thursdays, and Pete and Vicky took all 4 kids Mondays and Wednesdays, and then we rotated Fridays, and that was amazing. And then by the end of August, heading into harvest, we knew that wasn't going to be good enough, and that's when we started the pod. So I think when you look at the fact that there's depression, and there is this kids needing socialization, and there are all these other factors that aren't COVID, right? But that are just as real as COVID. Like, how can you put those into the equation where they really belong and make those decisions that factor in those added equations that are now very real? Maybe they weren't real for the first 3 weeks, but they're there now, and they're probably only going to get worse. So what is that math? Right? And can you reach out to one other family and do that? Because I didn't see a different way other than finding other people to help.
And I would this is Lindsay. I would just add, I mean, again, like we are all feeling this, and it is brutal, and you can't succeed at any of this, but we have no choice but to power through this. And I think, one thing for me, I have tried to hold both my husband and I accountable of like, okay, from 6 to 8 in the evening, can the phone go somewhere else where you are not on it every 33 seconds? And it's like, let's be intentional, put it by the front door, and you have to walk in there. And so it's not, it's intentional that yes, you can go every 15 minutes, but you can't sit at the kitchen counter on the phone with the kids talking at, like, we haven't, we have to be available to them to the extent we can holistically for, 6 to 8 in the evening, and then we'll jump back on and all of that. So just trying to be intentional. But that usually ends up in my husband and I arguing because he doesn't, but I mean, to be honest, it's not pretty. But I'm like, all right, put it by the front door and I will do the same. You can go and, go and check it. But the other thing I would add is, You know, I am definitely not the fun, get on the floor and play Legos mom, especially not right now. I mean, we've had au pairs and nannies, and we have this complex, you know, we had a lot of moving parts. And then so for the kids to, I have to remind myself that, you know, they don't get to interact in that way. So I do last night, instead of doing the dinner dishes, I played Battleship with my 6-year-old, you know, and it was the highlight of his day. And it was just, you know, I guess I have to give myself permission and remind myself that that's going to make his day. And there's a lot of crap that I can't control at work, at, you know, at home. But playing Battleship with Logan was the highlight of his weekend, and that I need to try to do more of that. I'm not a substitute for all friends and all social interaction, but I do need to remind myself to play that role and make it fun a little bit more intentionally perhaps than I did in the past.
That is so funny. My 6-year-old and I had a mean game of Battleship yesterday as well. He kicked my butt by one peg.
We are big Battleship fans here too.
That's awesome.
I think this is just the fact that we acknowledge that we need to do something, that something is going on, that we need to do this and this and that. I think that's, again, one of the positives that I take from the pandemic, that, I never saw that. Like now I'm seeing this, and the dynamics of a family, the dynamics, like we need to understand there's different dynamics, and I think we all gain from that.
Thank you, Bruno. Thanks very much. So we're over time actually, but and I, just as a word person, I've been writing a couple of things down, and some of the things that sort of stuck out to me are that this is an opportunity to force ourselves, quote unquote, to have more fun, because it benefits everybody when we do. But the other thing is that some of the survival tactics are involving other people and reaching out and asking for help. Those were some of the things that sort of I noticed as in listening to you all so carefully. So thank you for that. I feel like there's a lot more that we can say. We can probably Devin, you know, maybe this is sort of a therapy hour, and maybe there's something to take away from that for the ABG community. I don't know, Beck, I'll leave you with the last word here in a second, but even if it isn't a formal thing, there is a lot of there's a lot of support that we can offer each other, not to add another thing to our to-do list, but just to know that each other is there and also experiencing a lot of the same things. Yeah. Beck, can I ask you to maybe wrap up and give us a final ABG word?
Yeah. Enormous thanks to all of you for your honesty, for your transparency, and really being willing to share journeys that, you know, sometimes in this time things get sugar-coated. So thank you all for being real. We, you know, as Kathy knows, we started this series because we wanted to tackle the subjects that lots of people don't like to tackle. It's a core tenet of A Balanced Glass. We like to talk about things that are maybe not the prettiest parts of our industry, but more so to remind ourselves how much community is out there for all of us, formally, informally. You know, we come together because we share, you know, a similar, let's call it professional experience, but more so, you know, the humanity, the community, and really giving a crap about each other is such an important part of this group. So thank you all. Next month, we're going to turn to looking at moderating through the holidays. So parenting, moderation, I don't know, may or may not work, but I kind of hope for all of us we're not doing Parenting in the Pandemic Part 2 in October next year. To say thank you to you all. This will be up on the website by the end of the week, because I had people texting me saying, really sorry I couldn't join, had to do Aaron's homework, had to take the kid at the doctor, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's another reality of this community. So thank you again all. We look forward to seeing you again next month, and yeah, stay well. Drink lots of water.
Thank you for organizing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
We are all in this together. We will rise. And this is my word as a sommelier. I cannot let it go. I love Portuguese wines, but please drink more Oregon, more Washington, more Sonoma, more Napa. They need us. It's the time, the season. Let's put Beaujolais a little bit on the side for a little bit. Let's drink something a little different. Cheers.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.